Morning, everybody. This is always sort of that weekend that's a little different at Northway because we know there's probably about a quarter of our people that regularly attend are traveling. And then we also know there's some folks that maybe used to go to church here. I saw some of those folks that have moved away and are back for the weekend, or you're in maybe visiting family and friends and you came to church with them this morning. So welcome. Like seriously, thrilled that you're here. Like Ken said, if you're here for the first time, you're from this region, you don't have a church, we'd love to get to know you. Come on up front after the church. We have elders up front that are up here to pray for you. I'm usually up here after the service. Kent, we'd love to answer any questions about our church. So here's a question for you. Can you, for those of you that are old enough to drive a car, do you remember the first time you actually got behind the wheel by yourself? Like, I'm not talking about like when you were learning and, mom or dad or a driver's ed teacher was next to you. I'm talking about the first time you got your license, you got the keys, and you are going to actually drive a car by yourself, right? Anybody remember that? Do you remember the car? Can you remember the first time you took the car out? Do you remember where you went? Was there like, man, I'm just going to go cruise around North Park or something, right? Do you remember where you went? My father at this time when I was like a teenager, he owned used car lots. So there were always lots of different cars at our house. And none of them were really mine. Like I knew at any minute I could get a phone call from him saying, hey, I sold that car. You need to bring it back down to the lot and I'll give you something else to drive. So I have no idea what my first sort of solo drive car was. Not even a clue. Could have been one of a dozens of different cars. And frankly, I don't remember where I went either on that first solo drive. It's almost 40 years ago, right? So for me, nowadays, sometimes I struggle even remembering my own children's middle names. Like the other day, someone asked me what my youngest daughter, Erin's, middle name was, and I was like, I couldn't think of it right away. That's not good, right? That's something, And you know what jogged my memory for her middle name? Like, I just pictured in my mind, it came to my mind, like, when she was misbehaving, my wife would say, Erin, Christina, get over here, right? Did anybody else's mom do that? You get the middle name when you're in trouble. Like, if I'd walk in the door, Scott Allen, get in here. I was like, oh, just shut that door. I don't know what I did, but did anybody get that around the Thanksgiving table this weekend? Did any of you get called out by your middle name? So I don't remember my first solo drive. However, you know what I remember clearly is each of my daughter's first solo drives, right? If you're a parent, you're tracking with me. They've got the car keys in their hand, and they're walking towards a car, and you're thinking this cannot possibly be happening, right? But most likely, or one of the reasons is because it's your car that they're going to probably get in and drive, and that scares you. But for me, it's like they just graduated preschool, didn't they? How could they possibly be about to back a 2-ton piece of metal out of the driveway and head down the road? And when that's happening, all you can do in that moment is give them those final instructions, right? You're almost following them to the car. And you're saying, all right, now, be careful, buckle your seatbelt, obey the speed limit, right? You're just going through those last couple quick final instructions, and then off they go. Anybody experiencing that right now? Anybody got one that's about to head out? You will never forget it. Trust me. It's a scary thought. That scripture that rolled, right, as I was getting ready to step up here, those were sort of Paul's final instructions. Those were his final words that he gave to a church in a letter he wrote. Actually, at the end of this letter, he rattles off like 14 final instructions. It's almost like I got to get this all in before this letter ends. It's almost like he's chasing them down with these final instructions. Do this, don't forget this, do this, remember this. He's following them out almost to the car and rattling off these final instructions to a church at Thessaloniki. And I know like some of you have heard that pronounced Thessalonica, but I was going over this with Jim Platt, and I said Thessalonica, and he said, that's not the way you say it. I was like, all right, Jim, how do you say it? And he said Thessaloniki. And I said, that just sounds sort of wimpy. The church at Thessaloniki. but I'm going to say Thessaloniki the whole time because and you could take it up with Jim if you don't like it. Thessaloniki, it was the capital city of Macedonia. This was a really modern city of its time. The city had its own government. It was led by magistrates. There was a Jewish settlement there. Paul heralded the good news there of Christ, and he planted a church that was mainly made up of folks that were previously Gentiles and pagans. A riot ensued because of the ruckus that these Christians were sort of causing. Paul's life was threatened. He fled, and then sometime later, he writes this, the first of 2 letters to them. And I guess a couple of the things that are going on with the Thessalonians at this time is, one, they thought that the return of Christ was imminent. They thought he was going to return like any day now. So some of them were quitting their jobs. They were becoming incredibly lazy. They were basically the guy in the street, some of them, telling everybody, world's coming to an end, Jesus is returning, turn or burn. And he was catching wind of this. And Paul wrote them this letter with that theme and a couple other themes in mind. That's why if you read this letter, he talks a lot about working, because he's saying work. And he also talks a lot about living a quiet lifestyle. Like go about your day, working hard and loving on people. And then at the end, amidst these clear final instructions, it was in the video, he says this: rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and give thanks in all circumstances. 3 sort of final instructions he gives. If you were ever giving like a speech or if you were writing a letter, right, often what you end it with is the closest to your heart or to the mission or to the vision of why you're giving this speech or why you're writing this letter. At the end of it is most often the details that you want to make sure are not forgotten. Right? So when my daughter is headed to that car for her first solo drive, I'm not telling her to remind her to check the air pressure in the tires. Or do you remember how to work the garage door opener? No, that stuff's not, I'm telling her, put your phone in your purse. Buckle your seatbelt, right? Be careful. Throughout this letter, Paul, he mentions many things. He gives instructions, warnings. There's a whole lot of encouragement in this letter. But at the end, he gives his final instructions on what he does not want them to miss. Among those, he says things like help the weak, right? Encourage the faint-hearted. Be patient. He says seek to do good. Abstain from every evil. However, at the end of those 3 final instructions that were in the video that I just read to you, he puts something significantly different at the close of those 3 final instructions. If you picked up on it, he said, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. In the close of this letter, again, he spells out about 14 different final instructions, but he only says, this is the will of God for you, after he says, rejoice all the time, pray all the time, give thanks all the time. If you do those 3 things, he says you're going to be in the will of God, in Christ Jesus for you. As a pastor, I often sit with people that are struggling with a big decision, right? They come to me, they're looking for some spiritual guidance in a big decision that they're facing. And sometimes they'll say something like, I just wish I knew what God's plan was for me. Or I wish I knew what God wanted me to do in this spot. And if they've been around the church for a while, they might even use the word, I just want to do, God's will. I just want God's will for my life. So, when I hear that phrase, sometimes what I do is read them those couple verses. I'm like, well, here's what Paul says. Here's what the scripture says. If you want to be in God's will, just do these 3 things. And I read them to them, and they go, yeah, Scott, I get that. But this is a really big decision. Like, I'm talking about a career change maybe here. Or whether I'm supposed to move cities, or whether I'm supposed to ask this girl to marry me. So this is like a really big decision. I get all that stuff. And I sometimes think to myself, I know maybe those 3 instructions sound so simple, but I really believe in all my heart that if you're consistently doing those 3 things, God will reveal his will to you. He will bring solutions. He will direct you or bring somebody into your life to direct you, to provide answers and direction and peace. You know, on this topic sort of seeking God's will, sometimes I see two extremes. Like I see sort of maybe a group of people here that sometimes often almost like hyper-spiritualize desiring to be in God's will with every single decision they need to make. And sadly, sometimes they become paralyzed, this group over here, right? Instead of simply practicing rejoicing and praying and giving thanks and allowing the decision to come, they get stuck in almost what I would call like burdensome prayer. And sometimes they just overburden everybody else around them in their conversation because they just feel like they've got to get this thing absolutely right. They need to hear from God. And they get stuck. And sadly, in this group, sometimes I see them do nothing. They just sort of sit and spin in it. And then I see this other group, maybe over here, like the other sort of extreme end to it. And these are folks that oftentimes will do very little of those final instructions. And that what they'll do is often just quickly, sometimes recklessly, make a decision. But what they want God to do is come over here and bless the outcome of the decision that they made. And then as soon as it goes off track, as soon as that outcome doesn't go the way they wanted it to, God's blamed. God's not to be trusted. God doesn't care. God didn't come through. So what I want to do is I want to take a few minutes and walk us through these three final instructions and explore what it really does mean, in this case, to be in God's will. Clearly, we could spend like a couple weeks on each one of these little phrases. I'm going to spend about 6 or 7 minutes on each one. So my goal is just to try to maybe generate some thought for you. But here's the lens I would like, if I could, to lay over top of these three things for us in this season. What if, for the next 4 weeks, you could pick, say, Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, so 4 or 5 weeks. What if you did those three? What if you really went about doing these three, after I sort of pull them apart a little bit, help you maybe sort of see what's underneath here? What if you did those for the next 4 or 5 weeks? What if you made rejoicing always, pray without ceasing, and giving thanks in all circumstances a priority? Here's what I believe, Northway, with all my heart, that you will find yourself on Christmas Eve experiencing God's will for your life. So the first one is this. The first final instruction Paul gave was rejoice always. And the Greek word there is kairate. And it doesn't mean be happy, right? That's not what this rejoicing is. The word has got two sort of significant meanings, and they really go like this together. The first is sort of a widely used greeting. So the first sort of behind, deep into this word rejoice, it's just welcome. Hey, I'm glad to see you, right? It's just sort of an engaging welcome. Paul uses it in the very first verse of chapter 1 of this letter. It's just sort of like simply a joyful acknowledgement. It's not some kind of forced smile or faked happiness, right? No, with these first of the final three instructions, I believe Paul is simply saying this: greet your day with joy. Start out as you engage someone or you head off to work expecting joy. Meet them. Make your first step. Lean in with joy, is what he means by saying rejoice always. And in addition to it meaning that sort of greeting, the other meaning of this is the word is deeply associated, get this, with the confidence in God's salvation. See, rejoicing means that I believe fully in the redemptive plan, and that being in God's community eventually is going to lead to endless joy. It's an incredible confidence in that fact. This group that Paul was writing the letter to, they're no different than us. They were going to have days that were completely unfair, right? Days of complete sadness and pain, even some extreme crisis, right? And Paul's not saying, in those days, just sing that little tune. Don't worry, be happy. That's not what he's saying here. He's saying, rejoice always means lead with joy. Start with joy, with the day, with the person, with the job, with the world. Start with joy. But when it brings challenges, which it will, then lean back into the deep confidence of God's salvation, a plan, a will for your life. This summer, I read a book. Someone gave it to me, and it was probably one of the one or two most impactful books I've read in the last couple months. It's called Through the Eyes of a Lion by Levi Lusko. Levi is a pastor in Montana whose 5-year-old daughter, Lenya, tragically died 5 days before Christmas from a common asthma attack. Can you imagine? Lenya's nickname was Lenya Lion because of her untamed, sort of wild golden hair, and also what Levi describes as an equally untamed spirit and attitude. He wrote this book out of his pain and through his pain. And one of the things he says in it is, don't wait for the crisis. And then I love this line. He says, you must train for the trial that you're not in. The worst time to get ready, any of you runners out there, the worst time to get ready to run a marathon is when the gun goes off, right? And you got to run it. The worst time to, get ready for a fight is when you're in it. What he's saying here is to prepare yourself. See, some of us, I think we don't rejoice always because life's been tough. It's been unfair, cruel. We weren't ready for it. We weren't expecting something that happened to happen. And I guess I have some bad news and maybe a question for all of us. Whether you're a Christian or not, you are either in a trial or about to be. Are you ready? See, the book, he writes some facts about lions. Lions are farsighted. Their eyes can process light at a higher degree than almost any other animal. They can stretch, get this, they can stretch their pupil 3 times the normal size so that in darkness, in complete darkness, they can see movement and shapes out there that no other humans or animals can detect. So the analogy is this. To experience and live out rejoicing always, we need to have the eyes of a lion. We need to know and be able to see through the darkness and through the pain and through the sadness and know that out there, God's moving. I can see he's moving out there. God's salvation and redemptive plan is real. And I can see that through the eyes of a lion. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, I just love this verse. I think it really sums up the point. It says this, so we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away, we're getting older, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen, they're transient. But the things that are unseen are eternal. When or through or though we are afflicted, so when the world turns upside down on us, we need to see the unseen. We need to be able to know that out there, God is moving, that he's for us, that he cares for us, and that through him we can overcome. Right after Easter this year, so we're planning sort of out that far right now. Right after Easter, we're going to do a 3-part series on grief. What do you do when your world just completely goes upside down on you? This will be, one of the key takeaways of that series we've already determined is going to be these next couple sentences. So try to process these for a moment. See, the more passionate you are about setting your soul to heaven's time zone, the more you will find joy here on earth. See, you've been made for a person and a place. And that person is Jesus, and that place is heaven. And until you're tapped into that knowledge and really believe it, I think you're going to struggle with rejoice always. See, to be in God's will, to rejoice always, does not mean that you'll walk around with some big goofy smile on your face saying, Jesus is my homeboy, right? That's not what we're talking about here. See, you think for a day that goes by that Levi Lusko doesn't miss his baby girl? Of course he does. Rejoice always means getting up each day and greeting it, leaning into that day, into the people, into your job, into your life with joy. And then knowing that if it goes sideways or completely implodes on you, you can use your eyes of a lion to see that God is moving out there. You can trust in his salvation, in his plan, in his will, because in him we win. He conquers, and therefore we are more than conquerors in him. So the second sort of final instruction that Paul gives, right? He says, pray without ceasing. And just so you know, that word prayer, that's not like, it doesn't represent this action of when you think of prayer, like a quiet time, you by yourself, maybe kneeling down at bedtime with a journal, praying through a specific list of prayers. But Paul, he doesn't mean actual literal prayer here. What he means is, get this, it's the awareness and a continual dialogue with God throughout the day. That's what he's talking about here. He's not saying pray without ceasing, like, oh, I need a 10-minute break from work for right now because I got to go over here and pray because I'm going to pray without ceasing. No, it's just a constant awareness, a constant dialogue, right? It means that we should be aware of the needs of people that we see, that we come in contact with, and also aware of our own needs, and then continually asking God for direction and blessing and favor in your day. Can you think for a moment, just over the last sort of 24 hours, what were some of your prayers? So I'm not talking about like, if you have your journal and you sat down and you prayed this morning when you got up, or, last night before bed, and you had such an intentional set-aside prayer time. I'm talking about what were some of your prayers just throughout the day? Some of your ordinary prayers that you were praying for. See, a while back, I saw this promotional piece for WestJet Airline. You can look it up on YouTube if you want to later. But on a particular flight they chose at the airport boarding area where people were about to get on a flight, it was going to be about a 5-hour flight, they set up this large Santa box, right? This video interactive thing. And you were invited just for fun to go up and scan your boarding pass. And then it launched this sort of interactive Santa scene, like at the mall, him asking what you want for Christmas, right? And the commercial shows like kids stepping up to it, and they're asking for, all sorts of toys and different things that the kids would ask for. But they invited adults to do so too. So adults would come up and scan, and then adults would ask for things. Like one guy asked for like a large screen TV. One gal asked for plane tickets. She has a sick friend and she wanted to see her, and so plane tickets to go visit. There was your classic stuff. All the electronics and technology were being asked for. One guy even stepped up and said, I need socks. Okay, so the people then thought that this was just a gag, but what was going on behind the scenes is there was this massive team of people recording each and every single gift of each and every single passenger, right? And matching it with the name from their boarding pass. Then they launched that email to another team on the ground where the plane was going to land, and they went shopping. A massive team floods the malls, and they go shopping for each one of these gifts, finding each unique gift. They rush these gifts to the airport where they're wrapped and packed and name tagged, right, for each of these people. And then when the folks arrive at the baggage claim, right, a lot more than just their baggage comes out, right? Out comes every single one of these gifts they asked for. The kids' toys, iPads, large screen TVs, some people are crying, some people are laughing. The gal that got the plane tickets, to visit her sick friend, you could see her sort of crying, and the commercial closes, Santa shows up, the same one from the video, and he's waving to everybody, and the final line says, the guests never expected what they asked of Saint Nick would actually appear. It's sort of a cool commercial, but here's my illustration point to it. How would you have liked to have been the guy that showed up to the baggage claim that asked for socks? I mean, that dude blew it, right? There's people walking out beside him with laptops and big screen TVs, and he's got like a little bag of socks. You see them in the video, like, hey, look at me, I got socks. You know, here we go. Sadly, I believe in a lot of our prayer lives, we were asking for the equivalence of socks. God, I need this thing. God, help me get that red light. God, help the line at the mall not be too big. God, help my team win. God, get me out of this jam. God, make this happen. We're praying for socks. What if over the next 4 or 5 weeks, you started praying for some big ticket items without ceasing? Okay, Scott, so what would be a big ticket item? Well, there are 4 themes for our Christmas series this year called Choose Christmas. Week 1, what if you are about to begin to pray without ceasing for healing? Big ticket item. Maybe for you it's spiritual healing. But maybe you and God have just become distant. Maybe you feel like God has let you down. Maybe it's the church that you feel like you've been let down. Maybe it's spiritual healing that you need this Christmas. Maybe you've been deeply wounded by someone. What would it be like to pray for some relational healing without ceasing for the next 4 or 5 weeks? Maybe it's physical. Maybe something is going on with a loved one or a friend. What if you were to pray without ceasing for physical healing over the next 4 or 5 weeks? You know, in week 2 of this series, we're going to talk about forgiveness. How about that one? That's a big ticket item. Why don't you pray for that without ceasing? God, give me the courage to ask for forgiveness from this person, or to finally forgive someone that has hurt you terribly. That's a big ticket item. Joy is week 3 of our Christmas series. Choose joy. How many of you just need some joy? Can I ask you something to challenge you? Why don't you pray for, without ceasing, for God to bring some joy into your life, and then don't fill in the blank. Let him decide what the joy is that you need. Rather than, God, I need this, then I'll be joyful. No, God, big ticket item here, I need some joy. The last one is freedom. It'll be Christmas Eve. Is there something that this year you need to let go of that has got you tied up, burdened, wore down? Something that you know is not healthy for you? Maybe it's an addiction. What if you were to pray without ceasing over the next 4 or 5 weeks for freedom in that area? Those aren't sock prayers, right? Those are the type of prayers that will lead you and find you in God's will. The third one, final instruction that Paul says is give thanks in all circumstances. And at the heart of this phrase, it's not a social gesture. It's not the social gesture of simply like thanking somebody. It's not like your mom saying, like, did you say thank you? Like that's not the heart of this phrase. This is the kind of thankfulness or gratefulness that is deeply connected to grace. This requires thanking God and believing confidently that he is at work in all circumstances, regardless of whether or not it makes sense. Folks, life in real time, it can be really messy, right? Now catch this phrase. The fingerprints of God are often invisible until you can look at them in the rearview mirror. Oftentimes you can't see God's fingerprints in the circumstance you're in until you're through it and it's behind you in the rear view mirror. I think at the heart of gratefulness is simply making a decision to trust God. See, if you give God thanks today, it will allow hope to grow for tomorrow. If you refuse to be grateful for today, it has the opportunity to suffocate hope for tomorrow. I don't know about you, but I just so admire people that sometimes their circumstance seems so difficult. They're in a storm, right? They've lost someone. There's just destruction maybe even around them, but they still are grateful to God. Do you know these type of people? One of my faith warriors was a grandmother in the faith to me, a woman named Lydia from Homestead. And man, just incredible, difficult life, but just gave thanks to God all the time. Unbelievable. You know, I want to introduce you in a short little 2-minute video here to a woman named Barbara Garcia. She's 74 years old. And on May of 2013, her entire home and entire neighborhood was completely destroyed by a tornado that touched down in Moore, Oklahoma. Remember that from a couple years ago? That devastated that whole town. Many people lost their lives. And in this video, she's being interviewed less than 2 hours after that tornado roared through. And you can actually still hear the sirens of the emergency response teams arriving all around her. And in the video, it's sort of long, so I'm just going to show you a section of it. Again, it's on YouTube. But she just got done saying that she's grateful to God that she's okay. Amidst everything else going on, that's what she says. And then she's beginning to explain that she was taught in the event of a tornado that her safest place is in her bathroom. And she says to pick up her little dog, take this stool, and go sit in this one particular spot in the bathroom if a tornado is coming, because that's the safest place to be. And take a listen to the rest of the interview.
And the electric never went off, because the electric went off in the bathroom about the same time I felt the stool come up out of the floor. And I rolled around a little bit, and when it stopped, I was right there. That Presto cooker is what I saw.
You were lying there in the rubble.
And I never lost consciousness, and I hollered for my little dog, and he didn't answer or didn't come, so I know he's in here somewhere. But it was there and it was gone. Just no time. And then it was light, and I thought, well, I'm okay. And I had some stuff on top of me.
The dog.
The dog.
Hi, puppy.
The dog.
Oh, Bessie. Oh, Bessie. Bless your little bitty heart. Oh. Come on.
Get him.
Oh. Well, I thought God just answered one prayer to let me be okay. He answered both of them.
We need a rope or something.
I think he's just thinking he'll...
So she was grateful, right, for being alive, despite having seemingly lost everything, including her home and her dog. You know, I watched the follow-up interview with her a couple months after this. Turns out she had absolutely no insurance. But because that video went viral, thousands of people donated money. And combined with that, with some government grants, her home was rebuilt. She thought her dog was dead, thought her home was gone forever. But being grateful to God today in the circumstance allowed hope to grow for tomorrow. If your life right now seems overwhelming, it seems like one drama or crisis after another, can I encourage you to be thankful in all circumstances to God? Please hear me. I'm not saying be thankful for the circumstance. I'm not saying be thankful for the cancer. Be thankful for the loss. Be thankful for the pain. I'm saying be thankful and grateful to God in all circumstances. Even if it's hard, find the good. Be grateful and know that there is a God out there that's moving and will provide hope for tomorrow. Barbara started by saying, thank you, God, for me being okay, right? And then God blessed her with her dog and a new home. instead of looking at these final 3 instructions from Paul in this letter as rigid commandments, like do this or else, why not look at them as an opportunity over the next couple months? Why not look at rejoicing always as an opportunity to lean into every day and expect joy? And then knowing full well that if it goes sideways, that you have the eyes of the lion to be able to see out there that God's moving. What about over the next 4 or 5 weeks that if you just quit praying for socks and start praying without ceasing for some big things, some big ticket items in your life, some things that you're going to get to take with you to heaven? Look at that as an opportunity. Rather than like begrudgingly thank God, look at that as an opportunity to thank God in all things that he's done for you. Here's what I think, that if you do that for the next 4 weeks, on Christmas Eve, you're going to find yourself in God's will. You're going to find yourself an incredible amount of overwhelming peace. Oh yeah, you'll still have some decisions. You'll still have some stuff going on, but you're going to be in God's will. And there's a peace that comes with that. This God's will, it's not some intricate maze that you got to sort of navigate through. God's will is not some, extremely difficult game of Clue, where you got to figure out who did it and what room. And no, it's not like sort of, finding the exact right key to open exactly the lock that opens the door and then I'm in God's will. It's not it, right? It's just peace. God's will is peace and assurance, but it comes through rejoicing always and praying without ceasing and being thankful in all circumstances. On Christmas Eve, Pastor Kent will be preaching here in Wexford, and he's going to read from Luke 2, "Fear not, behold, I bring you news of great joy for all people." I want you to be one of the all people that night. He came to bring us great joy and peace. He has a plan and a will. I think some of us are trying to figure it out too hard. And we should just get back and lean back into these 3 things and see what happens over the next couple weeks.